Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to hear what everyone has to say. And thank you so much to Erika for conducting this panel with me. Yeah, and we're just gonna jump right into it.
Thanks, Paulina. Welcome, everybody. So grateful for all of you watching, and we're gonna spend about an hour today with this fantastic panel of advocates and passionate environmental educators and activists out there and in Santa Barbara community. One of the things that we're really, really excited about is that all of these good people are working locally in Santa Barbara. So, and am I correct that all of y'all are UCSB graduates? Is that right? Ana Rosa, are you also? Yep. Okay. So we got, oh no, Graciela. Okay, Graciela, I'm not either. So there we go. A few of us are showing up from other parts, but for the most part, we've got a lot of gauchos in the house, which is really fun. One of the things that I have been working hard to do to start all meetings is to give an attempt for a land acknowledgement. And I want to just start by saying we're going to get into it later about some of the philosophies that we carry with us. And one of mine that I have found to be really helpful in talking, especially around environmental education and environmental justice and activism, is the concept of paradox, where two things are just both true at the same time and you can't do anything about trying to bring them together. So to try to take a land acknowledgement in a couple of minutes is one of those beautiful frustrating paradoxes, actually. Thanksgiving addresses in more traditional indigenous lineages can sometimes take days to be giving proper acknowledgement to all of the different factions of life that give us the ability to survive and to be alive and to thrive. So the waters and the winds and the oceans and the trees and the rocks. So, and then of course, our indigenous people of ancestors who have been tending this land. So I'm standing, at least I think we're all in Santa Barbara at this point. So on unceded indigenous Chumash lands and waters. So many, many, many thanks for those good people that are still tending that land today, our land today, and for the ancestors that have done it for many, many millennia. And I just love also we all take an opportunity to think about the land that we're standing on and find some time today to connect with some aspect of that beautiful water, land, air, rock. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whew. Thanks everybody so much for being here. We've got a fun list of questions, some ideas. I really want this to be conversational. I know that's one of Paulina's strengths, is to help us all just feel like we're sitting around the living room having a good conversation, and hoping that we're all going to learn something together today. So with that, Paulina, do you want to start us off with the intro questions for each person?
Yeah, of course. So we'd like to get to know you guys a little bit more, especially because the students might read your introduction, but I'm sure that's a little bit to hear from the person themselves. So our first question would be to introduce yourself. So that would be issues of area where you work in, how your volunteer, what you do for fun, your hobbies. And then the second part of that would be what makes you interested and what drives your love for environmental studies, justice, education, whichever area it is that you focus on. Whoever would like to go first would be great.
Do any non-dudes want to go first?
Go for it, Chris.
Yeah, I can open up. Hey, I'm Chris Ragland, UCSB alum, studying environmental studies. My work in town is youth-centered community organizing, specifically in ocean environments. My passion for the outdoors is magnetized to the ocean. That's just what I had the most access to growing up, and because of that, I was able to, swim all the time, dive all the time, surf all the time. And that's what I'm doing in town, is actually creating opportunities for youth to have a recreation in a natural environment. And then from there, build a connection to, or be more interested in wanting to learn about environmental science, putting the fun first. And what really drives me is just leaving it better. This whole thing, this big round rock
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
I can go next again. I'm sorry, can you give me the prompts again?
Yeah, of course. So it would be to introduce yourself and like the area that you work in, whatever it is you volunteer, and then to talk about what you do for fun, like your free time. And then the second part of that would be like what drives your interest in environmental studies, education, or like justice.
Sure. Well, thanks for putting this together. First of all, I'm super grateful for all of you and honored to be on the panel with all of you. Also, want to acknowledge that we're on Chumash land, echo what has already been said. My name is Graciela Cabello. I am the Director of Youth and Community Engagement for Los Padres Forest Watch. I'm also on the board of Wilderness Youth Project. And really, that means a lot of things, but I would say that most of my work is around getting people outdoors, getting people reconnected to natural spaces, their environment, and building community around that. My passion is really around people and land and what our cultural connections are to these spaces. You know, I initially became involved in the work just from my own personal experience and like doing, you know, having a connection with my backyard as a kid. And so, you know, recognizing at some point that there was a huge disparity in the kids that get to have access to the outdoors and those that don't, and how that affects their career tracks, became a really a big focal point for me. And so, you know, creating access and building a diverse conservation movement and environmental movement is really where most of my priorities are focused. What do I like to do for fun? Anything outdoors, like mostly anything. Yeah.
Thank you. I really like how you guys are adding reactions.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to use those more often. Thank you, Gracia.
I'll go and just acknowledge I'm feeling really tender today for a lot of reasons. One is I'm not used to talking about the environment in a space of mostly people of color. So it's really beautiful. So thank you for this. Usually I'm one, if not two. Usually the other person is any one of the other people who are on this call right now. Wow, ugly cry.
It's beautiful.
That's such
Don't
thing.
call it ugly crying.
So I'm executive director of One Step a la Vez, which is a teen center in Fillmore. And really blessed to be there. It's an amazing organization. And during a time when, you know, we're doing everything virtually, we're starting engaging back with Los Padres Forest Watch around getting youth outdoors, and also starting a bike club, which is really exciting. And I'm also on the board of La Casa de la Raza, which has been around for 50 years this year. Has been a blessing to be part of that space too. I'm also a mom of two daughters, one of which passed away, and her birthday is coming up in March. And also the anniversary of her passing is coming up in March. So it's actually been really hard to get out of bed these last couple of mornings. And I know I'm being like really raw right now, but it's like I was trying to hold it together and I just can't. So we'll just see how this goes. But being a mother is a very important part of my identity. And I feel like during this time of shelter in place, it's also reminded me, you know, how valuable it is to be connected with your family and the people you love in the outdoors. Because my fondest memories and the reason why I fell in love with the environment is because when I was a kid, we were really poor, and the only places we could really go was the ocean. And, you know, we would pack up the car, and everything we would share. So it's not like we all had prepackaged stuff that, you know, and so I guess part of my excitement about today too is talking about how like people of color, from what my experience is like, we're naturally environmentalists. Like we try to reduce, we try to reuse, like we do all that stuff, we carpool. And like that's part of the joy of it too, like doing it all together, right? And so yeah, that's my intro, I guess. Also really involved with working class issues around labor justice struggles with farm workers and several other things, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Ana Rosa. I really appreciate how open you were, and I definitely give you props for being able to be vulnerable. And I think that's something that we all can say we admire, and we give you sending lots of love. I know I saw the hearts, and I think we can all agree we do send lots of love. And I think it's good that you told us what was happening, because always take care of yourself first. You know it, and thank you again for showing up aside from everything going on.
With an incredible background for each one of you, it's going to be really hard to follow up with an introduction, and especially with Ana Rosa offering the strength of being vulnerable. I think that this highlights that for folks of color who are dedicating themselves to an incredible cause, of course being biased because I am one of them, I think it demonstrates the toll that it takes personally, mentally, physically, for us to continue doing this kind of work, because in so many respects it's quite personal. So when you're talking about, you know, the environment and protecting the environment, like it's not just right like saving any one charismatic animal. It is, you know, beyond that, it is protecting our communities from the regular horrifying injustices of, you know, environmental rights being violated on a regular basis. And I think that with that introduction, that is one of the big philosophies that I bring into my work. As somebody who was an immigrant from across the large pond of the Pacific, I was born and raised for the first 7 years of my life in the island archipelago nation of the Philippines. And so my background is quite amazing and in some ways privileged, because my backyard was a tropical forest, and, you know, 2 hours north from my inland barangay or village, you know, I had access to the ocean, and there was the lived experience of being an islander, right? Where, you know, anything that you throw out in the ocean will come back to you inevitably. Instills, as well as being raised in the city of Santa Barbara and partially in Goleta, really drove home that environmental consciousness in me and what I hope to bring into my work, as well as principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion in this work. My name is Michelle Irabon Sevilla. I use she, they pronouns. I currently work as a staffer for environmental policy issues for a local elected official, but I also volunteer my time as a steering committee member of 350 Santa Barbara. I graduated from UCSB, as we've alluded to, in 2017 with my ESBA degree, and continue to work in a number of capacities. I am a board member of several organizations, as well as now with Ana Rosa, chair and co-chair respectively of the County of Santa Barbara's Equity Advisory Committee, which is a volunteer committee that works with the county to enhance and improve upon their community outreach, to inform their 2030 climate action plan and their long-range planning mitigation for climate impacts for this county of Santa Barbara. So those are some of the hats that I wear and some things that I do for fun, like Graciela said, anything outdoors. You can catch me on the Channel Islands regularly trying to snorkel or kayak out in the ocean. I can barely stay on my feet, less better on a surfboard, so I can't do anything like that. But I wish I had those skills. And if I'm not out in nature, I'm usually helping out on the farm that I live at. Spending time with my two young cats, Emmy and Nona, or with my significant other, Daniel, who is a musician and composes classical and or avant-garde music at Cal Arts. So
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And thank you all again for giving us those wonderful background introductions. I can say we see a lot of your passion and philosophy already, which it's interestingly enough one of our questions. So yeah, our first question for the day would be, what is a philosophy that drives what you do? I think you all shared a little bit of that, but I think it'd be wonderful if we could expand on that.
I mean, one thing I would pull out is that that the people are part of nature, and I feel like that's something that gets divided, especially through kind of mainstream environmentalism. And so just remembering that, like, we are not separate, we are one with the earth. And so when we're talking about environmental education, it's not about going and preaching to people, especially when you're talking to people of color. They often know, how to take care of land and to talk about how we can coexist with the land, air, water. So I guess, like, when you talk about Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed, that the answers often come from the people and that we are taught by the people. It's not necessarily us teaching them. So that's one thing I would pull out from my philosophy.
just to elaborate on that, being raised in the Philippines and coming from a very deeply Catholic household, we were always given the sense that, God gave us this big green earth to take care of, but I wholly disagree and think that there is that in that kind of language, there's established a hierarchy that man is taking care of nature. But really, I completely agree with Ana Rosa that when folks, I regularly protest during my lunch hour to talk about the climate crisis, and folks, do regular things to perturb us or to bother us. But, what is astounding to me and what troubles me is that they think of themselves as separate. Like, when we have regular fires, you think that you're separate from climate change. You think that when we had the debris flow in January 9th of, I think, 2015 or 18, that you were separate from everything else, that what you're doing is completely independent of anything else, and you think you're protected from climate change. That is just a whole falsehood that I still can't wrap my head around.
Yeah, if I could share a quick story, because I think I have something that just happened recently that can put this all together pretty well. I was doing my taxes, and the guy who was filing the taxes for me asked me what my major was in college. And I was like, oh, it's environmental studies. And he was like, but all that is fake. I was never really exposed to something like that. And at first I was like, wow, people really do have this ideology that human and nature are separate. Like there is no, connection, or that we don't really need anything from it. And I didn't even know what to say. I was like, huh? It's shocking to hear that, unfortunately, that there are people who feel that disconnect. But again, I think a lot of that is sometimes rooted that there's maybe not that opportunity to have a real conversation, which now looking back, I know I should have probably not been in shock as much as I was, and tried to, maybe ask him why it is he thought that, and lead that conversation elsewhere to maybe change his mind. But yeah, that I just wanted to share that. Sorry for interrupting. I just felt very captivated by what you both said. And I think I completely agree that there is no such thing as human controls our surroundings, our environment. It's this beautiful dependence of one another, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the irony of it being the tax person, right? Like the of course the person whose profession and whole career is centered around, you know, counting numbers, which is such a human construct in itself. Not to say that, you know, it's not important, that the economy isn't important, but that it's just, you know, clear as day. That's why it's so important to actually have, you know, at least, if not a consistent routine, just have a place outside that you can go to that's just for you, you know, that you can count on it, because regardless of what environment you're in, it's reliable, it's there, and you can go there. So if that can be, you know, a place of no judgment, which is how I see, you know, like when I go outside, go for a hike, go for a swim, whatever that is, that's like therapy. That's my room. So to be able to have a safe place outside is so interesting. And not to say all tax folks are, you know, don't get it, but it's just, you know, you're in that moment, you're like, wow, this is really happening. Like you don't believe this is a thing, you know, and you're not prepared. And that's, I think, also another thing that speaks to, you know, folks of color in the outdoors is, you know, we're not prepared for those jarring moments. We're just trying to be where we are, you know. And yeah, the reflection, I appreciate the reflection, and you actually thinking like, how could I have done that differently, you know?
Yeah, I know. Looking back, I'm like, darn, I could have said this. There's no
That's
way I could go back.
That's it.
That always happens too, like in instances of racism too, where like something overtly racist happens and you're like in shock because you can't believe somebody would actually do that, you know? So don't feel bad. Like that happens to me too.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think I want to just uplift what you both said, Ana Rosa and Christopher, because there is, so at least with my philosophy around the ocean or any piece of nature, is that I have encountered so much philosophy of territorialism around natural spaces. And it's kind of especially jarring, especially when like my identity as an islander is formed by the ocean. So when I come to the beach, right, and you know, I get told, you don't look like you belong here. Like you make me feel unsafe. And just how like it's both an instance of just a philosophy that doesn't quite register with me, because it's not something private and it is belonging to everybody, as well as Ana Rosa like said, it is an instance of racism because I don't fit, you know, the California beachgoer look, right? And yeah, I agree. It's, as much as you might encounter that as low as, it's just hard to prepare for and how to respond.
Definitely. Thank you.
Do you want to chime in at all on your on philosophy, or we can move to another question, which feels real?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everything that I was feeling has really been said. I think that for me, it comes from a place of just respect for myself, respect for my community, and the way that we, you know, respect our resources. And so, you know, it is also part of my identity in the sense that, you know, any of our cultural practices are tied to like a long lineage of conservation. And so I feel like in general, you know, respect for the land is just part of who we are. And it's almost, it would feel disrespectful to be anything else. And so that's what drives me.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to expand on your philosophy, or do you feel like everything's been covered?
Yeah, I think, I think we hit all the bases. My whole, and I just have to really quickly shout out Ana Rosa for just being so inclusive, always being such a mother and nurturer in these spaces. Part of why I do this work and why I feel like I'm in these spaces is because of this person. So, and she's seen how my perspective on, bringing the fun first, making, and working long game and working with kids. I think she's the person that actually made me realize that that was a thing, because oftentimes I think people just have their lived experiences and that's how they are without realizing it. And it does take another person to say like, hey, hold on, like this is what you're doing and I want to support you and lift that up. So yeah, so support is so important, and yeah, it's blessed to have for sure.
Yeah, I want to echo what Chris just said. I feel like Ana Rosa is definitely somebody who really sits at the center of this community and also like carries so much of it on her own. And whether that's fair or not, that is what she does, and she really does support the entire community and always includes everyone. So thank you, Ana Rosa. Also super grateful for you.
Joining in on the love party for Ana Rosa. I am just so like, if I could reach through the monitor and just give you the biggest hug, I'm sure every one of us would give you the largest group hug, because for any students, driving it back to the students in UCSB, like, as long as Ana Rosa is here, you better reach out to her community, because she just has so many perspectives and connections. And while again, I agree that she burdens a lot, she, she has surrounded herself with a great community of folks who are invested like deeply, personally, academically, professionally in this work, and just the cause. And so Ana Rosa has done nothing but, I think, uplift so many folks who need to be uplifted in this community.
So you all basically want me to cry this whole show, right? Thank you. The feeling is very mutual. Just have to say that I have so much love and admiration and respect for each and every one of you. And yeah, I feel blessed to be part of this community.
Thank you. Thank you. We had the next question we were going to talk about was talking about erasure, but I really want to turn that question on its head, not because I don't want to talk about erasure, but more because I think that some of the beautiful themes that I'm hearing come out of this conversation and that I'm hearing coming out of the movement is a reclaiming of what environmentalism should look like or needs to look like in order to be different than what it has looked like. So perhaps we can talk about some of the themes that we all are finding. I'm hearing connection, hearing relationships, hearing not taking people out of the equation, but having them be holding the center in a relationship with the natural world. The question that, as it stood before, was how have groups of people or cultures been erased from the field of environmental studies and environmental education, and why does that matter both in the field now and historically? So I guess what I'm wanting to do instead is to just pull some more on some of those threads that we're seeing in our work now about what's working, what's changing the movement, what work are we doing that's actually saying, okay, we know that model wasn't working for any of us, and also tugging on this tender, beautiful thread that Ana Rosa showed us so beautifully about where do we have the opportunity for grief, and where do we have the opportunity to actually mourn those erasures. So maybe that'll just get all of us crying so that you can feel like we're in this together, Ana Rosa, because we are. But I don't know if that's too complicated of a question, or does that feel like we can tug on that for a while?
I think so. I mean, what the two salient examples that come straight to my head from that is like the Black Lives Matter paddle out that Chris Ragland organized, as well as the Chicanx Latinx Conservation Week that Graciela has been spearheading the last few years in Santa Barbara County. And the Green New Deal House meetings that I know Michelle has led, and I have led with Food and Water Action folks and Climate Justice Network folks from 350 Santa Barbara. So like there are examples out there of what works, where we're getting answers from the community to see how we can imagine a future that is more just and that is based on a love of our community and our environment.
Yeah, I would say that what I see happening and what also has room to grow is that a lot of these issues a lot of social issues have traditionally been compartmentalized. And now there seems to be a movement where these pieces are all coming together in this very intersectional way. And so the community is really organizing around, letting people know, like, immigration rights are not separate from environmental rights. Black Lives Matter is not separate from the environment. Indigenous sovereignty, all of these issues are coming together in a way that is really making more people connect, and also just building a stronger movement. And so I think a lot of the times the mainstream environmental organizations struggle with like really trying to get involved in some of the other issues that they think are not related to the community, but at the same time are wondering why people are not showing up or why they don't have more diverse support for their causes. But these are opportunities for us to grow together in so many different ways.
Just to touch on that, and also briefly before I forget my thought, like I think Rosa, you have definitely brought some tears, like straight crying in the club right now kind of vibes, just happy tears. And just always honored to be in every one of your in your company, because each one of you has done so much. And I think each of us who have worked especially in the nonprofit environmental space, I have my background is in the nonprofit museum space, and I was a museum environmental employee for at least 10 years, and have been in the nonprofit world for more than that. And after like having been kind of the digestible educator, right? We strictly talk about the science and how cool it is, right? Like, animals are so fascinating, plants and, all different types of flora and fauna. But now since having shifted my focus, rather maybe expanding it to encompass, environmental rights and focusing on people, I agree with you, Graciela, that we have some work to do, because those, and I think a question for me as folks continue to expand, sustainability and diversity into the work is just like, if you're going to be putting us into positions of leadership, do we have teeth, right? Do we have power? And what kind of are you just bringing us in because we look a certain way, or are you ready to onboard us with the principles of equity that we bring to? The work is certainly there, not just in Santa Barbara, but just generally culture, and it's not just the high-end company, for-profit company culture, but also in the nonprofit work. And I think as we straddle that, that'll be a good question for each of us folks to have as we educate others, as well as leadership in the nonprofit profit space, of where we stand and why it's important.
I feel like what's coming up for me after that is this absence of language that the people that really need to be included are not able to understand. When you talk about like the relationship between nonprofits and municipalities or the city or the county, I'm noticing that these folks can't actually talk to each other because the the words they're saying are not being, like, they actually don't understand them. And it's so important to have a person or an organization or some sort of middle in between that can speak both of these languages and relay the messages, because work on a community level may not be the responsibility of a city, and the same thing, community to the city, because it goes macro to micro so quickly. And yeah, the language part for me is, I think, where I'm trying to spend the most time on making people feel comfortable just saying exactly how they speak, and from there, yeah, we can actually have a conversation, and now we can talk, because people talk. That's just how it works. If you can't have a dialogue and everyone's just yelling at each other all the time because they don't understand each other, then yeah, we can't get anywhere.
That is so key. It's almost like you need a translator, right?
Yeah.
For these terms. And I find that's true too with grief, since you brought it up, Erika. I feel like I'm often having to navigate a very fine line, because people, will try to say things that are comforting, but I think the thing that's the most powerful about being in nature is that, nature is just there for you. It doesn't, have to tell you the right words. It's just medicine. And Graciela and I hung out on Saturday, and we went to the beach. And it just, I didn't share with her the fact that it was exactly a month away from the anniversary of my daughter's passing, but just to be together, knowing that, I'm with someone that I care a lot about and who I know cares a lot about me. And we were with my other daughter, Gloria, and she was having so much fun. And just to be able to put our feet and our hands in that sand was just so healing. So I thank you, Graciela, for sharing that space with me.
Thank you. Likewise, I had, a similar experience.
I feel like one of the biggest themes I see right now is the theme of having representation, especially because Chris, you mentioned language, and I think a part of that is seeing someone who you can identify with, especially, at least for me, as an environmental studies major at UCSB. At first, it was, I felt a little out because like I am a Latina, and I think there are Latina and Latinx, they're part of the major, but it's not to the point where I'm like, okay, I belong here. In the beginning, of course, I think throughout the progression of it, I think seeing people like you who I think I can resonate with, and people of color, it helps me feel like there's a sense of belonging, which I would like to thank you all for, again, agreeing to be a part of this, because it adds to that statement of increasing their representation, so that it feels safe and comfortable for everyone. And it just ties that inclusive factor into it all.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Paulina. I also just want to say that this is a really beautiful time to be coming into the environmental movement, because there is so much community that has organized and maybe wasn't there before. I was previously one of the initial organizers for this national group called Latino Outdoors. And when I found this community, it was like everything just started to make sense, and that's what really had been missing for me, is that I didn't see myself in whatever perceived idea that I had of the environmental movement. I didn't identify with it. And when I was able to find this community, then a lot of doors opened up, and we began to talk about the environment related to our identity, or in the way that we connected with it. So, as a student, there are so many groups and organizations for you to get involved with. Like, this is really the moment. This is the moment of Affinity Spaces and finding your crew.
I really want to uplift that, because it wasn't until UCSB, and mind you, I'm like one of the handful of like Filipino youth youth who grew up in the cities of Santa Barbara and Goleta. And it was a disgrace that I had to wait until college to realize that I had representation, right, of the Manongs or the Delano Manongs who helped co-start, when they started striking in the Delano grape strikes. That was the forefront of the ag workers' rights movement in California. And that when they approached, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta to ratify and join the movement, that I realized, I had representation in a movement that is so deeply tied to the environment, that these folk, that I had people, I stand on their shoulders, my ancestors, my elders, who are so deeply tied to literally growing the food that feeds America. And right, like, and being, having been raised in this very, very big bubble of the community of Santa Barbara and Goleta, that was just completely eye-opening to me. I wish I had learned about it sooner, not only Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta's names, but also Felipe de la Cruz, right?
Larry
And Larry
Itliong.
Itliong, exactly. And I think that representation, that affinity group, that it really took, cross-cultural solidarity and, true collaboration of our rich histories of being here in California, right? Like, this was originally part of Mexico, and the Filipinos were starting to be occupied and first landed in California in the mid 1500s. That was when we first stepped foot here in Morro Bay. And so to learn more of our history and that representation and how deeply tied we are to the environment was truly eye-opening.
And there were Japanese farm workers too that were part of this. And honestly, it really infuriates me when we talk about certain pieces of history as if they're monolithic, like that it was just Chicanos. And like, it's almost like people feel like it takes away from us to say that there are other people that were involved in it. And I want that to stop. Like, I want us to tell full stories about how our movements are intersectional and just uplift the power that it takes to change the world. Like, no one ethnic group can do that on our own. We need to do that cross-cultural work. We need to not be freaking homophobic. We need to, like, love our sisters and brothers, our siblings, wholeheartedly, and to come from a place of love when we organize. It's not about who's going to take the credit for this or that. It's not about this nonprofit industrial complex that makes us compete for dollars from foundations that some of them honestly don't really see the value of what we're really doing at the core. So I just want to uplift what you're saying, Michelle, because yeah, I mean, I thought it was a disgrace too that it took me so long to find out that there were the Larry Itlions, the Philip Veracruzes, that were part of that movement. And I think that those folks need to get the props that they deserve as well.
Well, I can't believe we only have 10 minutes left, and here we are. So I don't know if Paulina, you have an inspiration for how to spend our last 10 minutes?
Let's see. I really liked how the conversation was going, especially because I think I really like the idea of sharing something and what overall wrap up what it is that you came out of this panel with. So I'd like to share what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling right now. When I feel very supported, safe, inspired, and I think especially thinking about how representation is important. For me, it's not because you're like, oh, like Ana Rosa mentioned, it's not about we're better or I'm trying to divide myself from everyone else. It's with the idea that if everyone feels safe and comfortable represented, it'd be a lot easier for everyone to collaborate and connect and show each other that support and that love that I think we need to show each other, especially during times like now and tomorrow, always. So I think it's just emphasizing that the goal is not to create these divisions and these, categories to feel more, separate. to feel more united. And I know it's sort of ironic because it's like, how is it that I need someone to look like me to feel like a part of something bigger? But like, for me, that's how it works. It's like, and hearing how all of you have these stories about where it is it clicked for you, it feels amazing to know that we're going somewhere, if that makes sense. Like there is progress being made, which I think to me, it's especially that I'm like graduating soon. I'm just excited to meet more people, you know, more people who not look like me, who don't look like me. Yeah, that's how I'm feeling right now.
Honestly, I'm just feeling really like proud and grateful that our group is growing, and that, you know, because I remember just like 3 years ago, it was really hard to get together a panel of people of color on the Central Coast. So this is how it starts. I feel like the seeds have been laid, and you know, it's just going to continue growing. I hope that the students listening will, you know, reach out to us and continue to stay connected so that we can work together. For me, it's really important to have young perspectives and young voices in my work, because you know, we can't move forward without having the voice of young people. And I learn so much from everybody all the time. So yeah, just please feel free to reach out. I'm gonna leave my information with Paulina, and hopefully, you know, we can all connect.
Yeah, one piece that I wanted to touch on earlier when we were talking about language is certain words that hold a lot of power, like the concept of professionalism, which is really present, right, for folks who are in college. And so I want to speak to this because I feel like when you're a youth of color, when you hear that term professionalism, I think it makes you feel like you have to erase who you are, like you have to be in a button-up suit with a tie, and, you know, speak a certain way. And I think that we need to kind of stop using that language because people are beautiful and they need to come to spaces feeling like they can be their whole selves. Otherwise, we're not going to get the brilliance that they offer. So just wanted to touch on that too, just because I think when we talk about language, that's one of those words that really stick out to me that I think looking back did harm to me in the way that I felt like I had to shrink myself in certain spaces to fit.
Yeah, and to kind of build off of that, you know, I feel this need to adapt, you know, like in whatever setting that I'm in. And I think I'm getting to a place because of, you know, conversations like this and groups like this where I enjoy that, you know, and that's why I seek these kinds of spaces, so I can learn from the folks that I'm surrounding myself with, and allow myself to shapeshift intentionally, consciously, you know, that way I can communicate with people in the way that, so I can meet people where they are, you know, and that just usually looks like how you speak, you know, make someone feel less or more comfortable. And also being aware of that as well. Like something I kind of noticed in Santa Barbara is, you know, neighbors aren't necessarily, you know, very close with one another, even though they're right next door to each other. So yeah, learning to be a good neighbor, and how this work in the outdoors and this inclusivity thing, like that's what that really is if we're all being willing to just acknowledge one another and yeah, be more accepting of where folks are. You know, the conversation of this tax dude being like, that's not a thing. You're like, okay, we have some work, you know, I'm not going to cancel you, but like, you know, do I really want to take this on and make that a conscious decision? Yeah, I appreciate this conversation a lot, and we'll definitely be thinking about it afterwards. Thank you all.
I think just thinking about the audience and this being a student or group of environmental educators, having spent about 10 years being quite dedicated and regular in the field of environmental education, and in some ways having to do that in my day job, I think of one of the most recurring themes in terms of university research education, especially around the environment, is right. You are in UCSB. You are getting the privilege of being able to be, STEM educated, right? You have a privilege that not a lot of people are afforded for whatever reason. And so I think after walking away in some of these conferences where we focused on diversity and the need for sharing this information with folks who might not have that language down pat, right, who still should benefit from it, I think if there's anything that I would take away from this as a young student that has actually hindered my work as an educator, is that I haven't been very good about, again, what we were talking about, translation and translation of this information that comes from like very science, academic, heavy based language into digestible information that the community can use to empower itself to know, what is dangerous for a community, what needs to be worked on, what like what dangers are there, because if I can take this information and share this with my community, I can better protect my family and anyone else and everyone else who I share this space with, right? And especially when it comes to, as somebody who fights like public health hazards like namely oil and gas development that threaten important water resources where we still draw water from, right? Especially when we're running out of groundwater or we're not sure where our groundwater is going to come in the next few years with snowpack reducing. Like how can I take this and educate others? And also, as educators yourself, you are always in a position to learn. You're always in a position to learn from a wide diversity of audiences. And I think making sure that when you're in that mode, that you're not in an extractive position, right? Because you have that ability to take that whatever information folks of color are bringing you and then redigesting it, but really giving the acknowledgement that these folks are bringing their environmental and indigenous knowledge of being naturally so close to the earth, and being mindful of where that knowledge is coming from and respecting it is going to be very critical.
Also, just not making people of color do that labor for you and doing some of that freaking research yourself, because it's too much of a burden. Like I feel like all of us in who have been doing this work for a while, we get tapped on so much on such a consistent basis, and it's usually not with any kind of dollar amount attached to the knowledge, and it's not like we're greedy or we need to have so much financial remuneration for this stuff, but even the fact that that doesn't even come into people's mindset to say, hey, like what do you need, and like how is this an equitable exchange, or am I just taking from you without ever giving back to you?
Well, here we are. I think we could all happily speak for another few hours. And I know this is just the beginning of many, many longer conversations, or the middle of many conversations that all y'all have been having with each other in a wide community of people. So thank you. And I'll hand it over to Paulina to close us out, if that sounds right. Many, many thanks to each of you. I'm really honored to be in this circle.
Yeah, thank you so much to every single, like, I think at the end of every interview, I always feel so, I don't even know what the word is, just kind of like, that was so much fun, but also very uplifting. And thank you to Erika for organizing, getting everyone's time schedule to align. I know that was like difficult. I remember telling Erika, like, I thought something would work. There was so many options, but you guys are busy people. So I definitely also appreciate every single one of you to being able to set time aside from your day to come and talk to us. And I think I learned so much from every single one of you. And thank you to whoever suggested diversifying this panel. That huge props, because I feel like that's something that I can definitely overlook. And it's beautiful to have someone say, maybe we should be better and do this. So huge thank you.
I don't think anybody will be surprised that it was Ana Rosa.
Yeah, huge thank you. Yeah, I think that it's something that I'm definitely gonna think about moving forward, with a lot of things said in this conversation. I'm being left with a lot of reflection, and definitely going to debrief. So yeah, thank you so much to all of you. And I look forward to talking to you guys soon again. I'm sure the students are going to love hearing everything you guys have to say. And they might even, if it's okay, ask to reach out to you. Yeah, so that'll definitely be, we'll keep in touch for sure. And thank you again, Erika, and everyone. A huge thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Good day, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Oh, nice.